not luck that you are there, and it's not
Hmm.
luck that you are prepared to do a certain thing that they are now searching for.
Mm.
Um, uh,
Mm.
uh, but
Mm.
that's played out. But like back to more specifically to your point about creating opportunity. Um, I mean, I can't say enough about it because when you catch opportunity, um, you're getting something that's been it's already been crafted, right?
Hmm.
And so because it's been crafted by someone else, it doesn't necessarily contemplate the unique things that you can bring to that opportunity,
Hmm.
ways you can enhance that opportunity, et cetera, right? And so creating opportunity lends you the opportunity to uh, uh, sort of tee things up for success in unique ways
Hmm.
because you're envisioning that opportunity in a way only you can operate within it, uh, in ways you bring your best self to it and your biggest strengths to it.
Hmm.
If you've taken the time to sort of um, do the work on yourself and understand what you're good at, why you're good
Yeah.
at it, what you're interested in, and bringing all those things to bear. Um,
Hmm.
but that's what comes to my mind when I think about creating opportunity versus catching it. I think about
Well, it's so non-linear, right?
yeah,
And to me, like the corporate ladder, which we talked about climbing it, right? Because
oh,
we both have throughout our lives, right? It's so linear from a thinking perspective. But if you step into the creation aspect, it almost gives you the ability to leapfrog, right? Which
absolutely,
you've been able to do numerous times in your career if you would have simply just taken whatever the next role is, right? It's
yeah,
like me, oh, well, you need to be a chief operating officer at this size company before you can ever be a president, CEO, et cetera. Whereas you've kind of had those experiences, you have that dream, and then you start reaching out in boldness, like you said, right? And knowing your strengths, and then you've been able to leapfrog a few times, frankly,
yeah.
in just amazing ways.
Yeah, and so one of my favorite lyrics comes to mind with regard to that, right? Um,
Hmm.
from the great Biggie Smalls, the songwriter Biggie Smalls once said, "I climbed the ladder to success, escalator style."
Hmm.
And to me, we talked about reps. I guess I'm trying to tie a bunch of concepts together, right? So when you talk about reps and talking about moving in your strengths and all the things that come to bear, you begin to develop what's called cumulative advantage,
Mm.
right? Um, and and with that cumulative advantage, you're now able to not simply move linearly, but exponentially in terms
Mm.
of leapfrogging opportunities, because you
Hmm.
can now take experiences, skills, and that you've learned over time and bring them to bear in new ways
Hmm.
that don't sort of require you to learn them one at a time. And
Hmm.
so, for example, in my own life, um, I've been able to um, think about how I want to tee this up. Long story short, I had gone from fairly junior roles within venture capital. So after I left Wharf, I was able to move on to PepsiCo, where I started out as a technology scout.
Hmm.
Um, that then reorged into a corporate, strategy team within technology, uh,
Hmm.
which was a new team. And as they were handing out roles, they were like, "Oh, well, we've got a couple initiatives that are kind of brewing. Is anyone interested in this sort of venture capital space?" I don't know what that even is. We're a food company. I don't know what are we doing with tech and venture capital. And I was at the ready with like, yes, I'd love to take that over. Let me tell you what
Immediately.
why we need to be working in that space. And so, the reaction was great. Someone who wants this, someone who's willing to lean in. And
Hmm.
venture capital wasn't nearly sort of as ubiquitously popular as it is right now. Like,
Sure.
but especially corporate VC. But because I was there, I was ready. I raised my hand. I had a point of view. I was smart enough on the topics that roll into that to then sort of articulate why it was important. They were happy to let me do it. And so I then, sort of took that experience and, and everything that came along with it and rolled it into the next experience, to the point that, I've kind of landed where I am now. And so, I now live in Houston, Texas. I lead a early stage venture capital fund called HTX Impact Fund. It's a $50 million venture fund that invests in Black and brown founders in the greater Houston region, basically the large cities in Texas. And I was able to do that given a background that was extremely nonlinear. But when they were looking for a CEO to lead this fund, they wanted someone who knew a little bit about clean tech and energy. They were looking for someone who knew something about healthcare, med tech and digital health. They were looking for someone who knew a little bit about space tech and gov tech and deep tech. They were looking for someone who knew a little bit about consumer packaged goods in the CPG space. And what uniquely suited me to answer that call was the fact that I had up until that point what I considered a very random career. Because when I was at the University of Wisconsin, I specialized in biotech applications. I got a master's degree in biotechnology, which had me dabbling in biofuels and medical devices and biotech-related therapeutics, which had nothing to do with what I was doing when I finally got to PepsiCo, and I was investing in agriculture and food tech, and a bunch of other sexy things, a bunch of other things that people did not find sexy. And then I went from there to Ohio State University, where I was commercializing research, this time in gene therapy, and sort of other areas of specialized research. And so when I finally got presented with this opportunity, and they're like, do you think you could either build a team around it, or do you think you've got sort of breadth of experience that might give you insight into all these areas? I was able to tell a story that presented itself as extremely cogent, extremely relevant, extremely perfect, that I could not have set up on my own. And that I thought that if I ever wanted to go to California and work at a particular, any one of those big flagship funds, that I'd have a hard time explaining like how I'm suited for what is typically funds that do one or two, maybe three things, even agnostic funds. Because I'm like a little bit all over the place, right? No, but it through again, providence and God's will and all that sort of stuff, I am perfectly prepared for this role. And then even the question about they asked me like, well, how do you feel about Texas? And would you be interested in moving to Texas? And I said, I'd love to move to Texas, and here's why. So I'm originally born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is only 5 hours from Houston. I've got a brother and sister that live in Dallas. I've got cousins who live in Houston. My parents still live in New Orleans. Like, it was a perfect sort of confluence of events that I could not have, sort of handpicked on my own. And so, just being prepared and then stepping into the moment, like it just all came together.
Yeah, man. And the crazy part is, I'm sure you read The Alchemist, and a bunch of our listeners have as well. It's almost like this culmination to the end of the story in The Alchemist, where they're like, and while you were looking for it, the universe was looking for you as well.
That's right.
And that's the power of being willing to take that first step, being willing to be bold, being willing to, dive deep into who you are, your strengths, bringing all those pieces together, and at the same time being willing to also create, right? Because we'll have to have you back, because there's something I want you to really unpack, because I think that there's significant power in being willing to raise your hand, even when you're not quite ready, right? And I heard somebody say it this way, like, if you have, I want to say it's like 60 to 70% of requirements like for a role, you should just go for it, right?
Yeah.
By the time you have 100% for a role, then technically you're overqualified, right? Like you shouldn't even be in that role. You should be shooting for something else. And so I think that there's a significant power there, and would love to unpack that, with you another time. But one of the other powerful pieces that I'll kind of sum up what I at least received from you today, and I'm going to look in the camera for everybody because I think that you all need to understand this. And hopefully this is one of the things that you've gotten from, what Zach has shared with us today, because there's so many nuggets, is that the world is waiting for you.
Yeah.
Right? If he hadn't been willing to take these steps, and literally nothing that you're going through right now, experiences, everything else is shaping and building you for that opportunity. And you need to understand that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people whose destinies are also tied directly to you being willing to take that action, right? The
Yeah.
people that you're going to be able to impact as a result of leading a fund, right, that you're going to be able to invest in, are going to impact other communities, are going to impact millions of lives. And it's all because you were willing to take that first step, right? That's just powerful, man. So powerful.
For me, it ties back. I'll give a couple hints to like what you want to follow up on, and I think, for people, it should always come back to talent and the power of talent, as opposed to fulfilling a list of requirements. Because,
And when you say talent, just define talent for what you mean for folks.
Yeah, sure. Talent is, gosh, I'm not going to give the Gallup definition because that's hazier in my mind at this point. But like the special things that make you, that you are especially good at, that you have developed, that you have perfected, that you've worked on, and because you're also naturally good at them, they feed on themselves and give you, unique competitive advantage. Like, that's what I mean when I talk about talent. And so I love to say talent always has options. And, from, when I started my career in HR consulting, I started in talent, hiring folks. And, one of the things we always talked about was hiring for talent. Don't hire for, must, be proficient at, this, that, and the third, X number of years experience. Look at their background and see if you think they have the talent to either perform it, or talent to figure it out, talent to eventually be good at it, et cetera, et cetera. And, that has fueled my whole perspective on not only jobs for myself, but jobs when I go to put people into particular places. And if you look at sports and some of the most successful coaches, they're the types of people who like to put talent into unique situations and let things play out. I admire the way Phil Jackson used to coach. I mean, he would take bench players and put them in the game in the first quarter. And what I found that did to him, because his bench players are getting more reps, because they're getting to play against the first string of the other team, in moments when it doesn't necessarily matter. When you really need that bench player to step up, they are going to be better than everybody else's bench player. Because they've been in the game in different scenarios. They're just built differently. And I think that mentality prepares you in ways for things that simply going along with the flow isn't going to do. And so I think you've got to, be willing to raise your hand, follow the opportunity. If you know what your path is, if you know what you're looking for, when you see it come, be ready to just jump at it, because you'll never know.
My man, just amazing nuggets, for the people today, and really appreciate you for, being with us. Hopefully we can hop back on your calendar, and get a chance to continue the combo in some kind of ways. And appreciate everybody for listening. This has been the Only Dream Big podcast. We'll see you next week.
That's all for today, folks. See you next time.